Welcome to Hardback Life. It's time for stories, sass, and strong opinions. Let's turn the page. I'm Cassie.
And I'm Becca.
The book is called Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig. And before we get into it, I jumped right there, but what's new, Becca?
It's been, like 2 weeks since we recorded, I think? Yeah, probably just grad class, honestly, and internship. I really feel like that there's nothing else that I do with my time. I'm a stay-at-home mom, so
Yeah.
there's that, but just getting into the routine of internship and doing my summer classes. So that's why I haven't done any weekly reading recaps on our Instagram, because I haven't had a damn minute to myself.
I stayed up until after 2 a.m. reading.
My favorite text messages are the 2:15 a.m. texts that are like, I just finished reading and I'm going to bed.
I'm reading the Third Crescent City book, and I'm so into it that I can't put it down. So I'm not done with it, but I just had to get to a point where, Cassie, you're either going to sleep tonight or you're not.
Was there anything new with you?
No, just that I don't go to sleep and I stay up reading. I'm tired.
I love that. Okay, so Matt Haig. Basically, the synopsis that I have to give for this book is not going to be funny because the book was not appropriate for a funny synopsis. I'm not going to joke about mental health.
Might have some dark humor around it, but it comes from personal experiences. I'm not making fun or laughing about anything I don't experience.
I'm not here to hate on the fact that this man has depression. Everybody's reasons to stay alive are reasons to stay alive. I'm very glad that he found reasons.
With this book, it's not that I hated his experiences or anything like that, but I thought we were going to get this really in-depth journey for mental health. And it just wasn't that. It wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I expected.
I bought the physical copy of the book to put on my mental health nonfiction shelf because I thought it was going to be one that I wanted to keep and reference. That's a lie.
I bought it for Kindle because we read it for book club, and I was like, oh, I'll probably refer to this. I really like that kind of stuff. It's the last book club book I bought because now I refuse to buy anything after that one.
So basically our synopsis is Matt Haig mansplains depression through personal experiences. That's the synopsis. To use some of the kinder adjectives from our book club's discussion, this book was disappointing. As a group with multiple mental health workers, as well as many who have their own mental health journeys, which is, I think, important to both of us, and that will definitely come up in the episode. We found the book to be problematic in many ways. He never actually says how he gets better, only that meds don't work, therapy doesn't work, and in our opinion, his wife has the patience of a saint. He also refers to others with depression as depressives, and that really just gave me the ick, and I did not like that, which we found insensitive. When you use the word depressives, it almost makes it like their identity, and I don't like that because my depression's not my identity. So if someone truly is in a dark place and looking for reasons to live, we don't recommend reading this book, but
No.
some of the Goodreads reviews that I've flipped through of people who have experienced depression and suicidal ideation, they're like, heck yeah, this is the best book I ever read. They must have found something in it.
I was going to say, maybe it's also just like the shared experience of the depression might be enough for some people. It's just not for me, because also I think everybody experiences depression and anxiety so differently than each other that I think he really lumped a lot of it together. And I think that's not fair, because I think a lot of people, like I said, experience it different, treat it different, and he just put everybody in one big bubble.
Too much generalization.
In life, generalizing too much is not a good thing. And then when it comes to mental health, I think that's part of the problem, because it's like, I have depression and I'm not as sad as you are, like you're being dramatic type of thing. And I just think that's not the stereotype we should be pushing around. Let everybody experience what they need to experience.
I agree. I also feel like, too, that before we get into the heavier conversations, I'll just give the trigger warning of conversations of depression, suicidal ideation, suicide. If that's hitting too close to home for you right now in your present life, then this might not be the episode to listen to, because we are going to talk about mental health. So I feel like before we get into the episode and talk about the book and do the whole review, I felt like it was important at least to touch on depression, just like a little education. So I'm no expert. I have no active clinical license, but all of the information that we've pulled and we've looked through for this episode comes from peer-reviewed sources. We're not just talking out of our ass. Number one, if you're listening to this episode and you don't really know what depression is or major depressive disorder, It is a common and serious mood disorder, and it's characterized by persistent sadness, loss of interest or pleasure, and impairments in daily functioning. So I just feel like highlights overall from research and peer-reviewed sources, just common themes and things to think about with depression are for sure like the prevalence and demographics of it, the neurobiology of depression, so basically like how depression affects your brain, which for me personally, in my experience with my own depression and like learning about depression, that's like super important to me, and I'm very passionate about like how it affects you biologically. Regarding prevalence and demographics of depression, over 280 million people worldwide experience depression, and it is a leading cause of disability, according to WHO of 2021. And onset most often emerges in adolescence or early adulthood. Women are nearly twice as likely to experience depression as men, influenced by hormonal, social, and cognitive factors. And that's from the Journal of Affective Disorders in 2019.
Let me ask you, in your opinion, do you think that's because women are more likely to actually go get the diagnosis, or do you think it's because we tend to actually have it more often?
I think my answer would be both, because I think that this statement from the Journal of Affective Disorders saying that because of like our hormones and social and cognitive factors, I think that there's obviously like peer-reviewed evidence like for that. But I also think that it's worth looking into the societal stigma of men not getting help and thinking that admitting mental struggles is like weakness. And so I would be curious to see the statistics on if that like impacts like more women being diagnosed. So I think that would be like the verbiage that I would change, is this talks about like women being twice as likely to experience depression. But I think that there would be like ground to stand on for, instead of saying experience depression, being diagnosed with depression. I think that small change of verbiage of experience versus diagnosis would be important. And I don't have obviously the research to back that up, but I think that's just like my like opinion.
That's where I was thinking too. Like, I'm just stereotyping. Like, a female is more likely to go to a doctor when they're sick than like a male in general, like physical illness also.
I think that overall, like we said, like I think that there's the societal stigma of men don't want to go to the doctor or men don't want to go to therapists because being sick or having mental health struggles is weakness. Like that's a whole societal stigma that needs to be addressed.
Mental health as a whole, I feel like, has really come a long way with the societal stigmas. But if you had cancer, you wouldn't be like, I'm just not going to treat it. You would do, you know what I mean? So I just don't understand. Like, the brain is still part of your body. Your hormones, your whatever is all still part of your body. And it doesn't have to be medication, but like therapy or coping mechanisms. There are so many different ways to treat it.
I think overall physical ailments or physical illnesses are more accepted in society than mental illness.
I'm very open, and a lot of people have said that to me about how, commented on how often I will talk about my mental health. But I'm like, but it be like that. Like, it's fine if you don't want to, but you shouldn't feel like you can't or that you're going to be judged for it. I make a point to talk to people about it because I want them to know it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to need a little bit of help in that way. So in that sense, just wrapping it all back to the book, like I do give Matt some props, I guess, for that. I'm gonna make a point to say, and I said it last time, first of all, even if I don't like your book, you still wrote a book, so good for you. And in this specific case, he is a male who wrote about depression, and I think that is two big things to take into consideration with this book. Is one, males talk about it a lot less than females, and two, it's still not a typical conversation in our society.
No.
So
I also think too that like in this book, and this was one of my issues with the book, which we can get into later, but I think that he also discusses in the book that he struggles with a panic disorder. And I think that a lot of the things that were discussed in the book more so felt to me like panic disorder than focusing on his depression. And so I think that the intermeshing of both was a little difficult for me. But like you said, like overall, you wrote a book and you were brave enough to tell your story and you were brave enough to put your opinions about depression out there. Me having an issue with the book is not discrediting your reasons to stay alive. Yeah. Like, I want to make that very clear.
No, whatever you can, if you're in that state and you can find the smallest thing to keep you going, that's amazing. And you should talk about that.
Yeah, good for you. If you have the privilege to have Paris be your exposure therapy and that's your reason to stay alive, then good for you. you're going to reach a very specific audience with that content.
Because, like, I also have a lot of anxiety. And I personally, going to Paris would not help in that sense. It might even make it worse because I'm traveling, I'm away from home, all of that. So it was hard for me to read it and really put myself in his shoes of him saying this is a great answer for anxiety and depression when I'm like, no, like, I don't want to leave my house at my low point.
And I think that you just hit a really important thing, is that your worldview and like your experiences are not the same as Matt Haig's. And so I think was where some of the disappointment for this book came for me. And I think you would share the same sentiment of, I didn't feel like I could connect as a woman, as somebody who has also experienced depression, but my experience with depression was very different. And like, I've explored SSRIs, I have gone to therapy and still am actively in therapy. And so my view and my experiences with depression and of depression are very different than yours. And so I guess it makes sense that I didn't like your book.
Well, I think we touched on this before, but like, depression is a very individualized thing. Any mental health disorder really is. Like, yeah, there are broad categories you can all fit into, but like I said, mine would not need what his needs. And what I think was, I don't know if dangerous, but upsetting about the book is so much generalization. And that
Yes.
really is what got me.
I think what I was looking for and what I wish had been like addressed is like, maybe in the beginning of the book saying, my experiences of depression are my experiences. And I'm in no way generalizing my experiences. And if my experience of depression doesn't align with yours, then that's okay. And also, let's just take a step further and recognize your privilege. Recognize that you are a white man and you have money, you had supportive parents. And so I think that it would have gone a lot further for me if he had taken the extra step to say, I recognize my identities and I recognize where I come from and the worldview that I'm experiencing. And this book might not hit for you because of that. That's what I think that I would have wanted, that would have made it a little bit more credible for me.
I agree. My biggest issue with the book, it was, like I said, the lumping and the generalizing. And I agree. Maybe if he had preemptively been like, I'm talking about my experience, I'm not talking about everybody's experience, then I could have maybe gone into it with a little bit less of a critical eye, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Like, this is a good segue into, we're like directly addressing stigma of mental illness, but like how Matt Haig addresses the stigma surrounding depression and anxiety. I think that we would both agree and say that I don't feel like that he did because he generalized so much. I think he played into the stigma.
I was thinking that too. And not that he really talked about a stigma at all. Like, he really didn't talk about how others saw him. He talked about how he thought they saw him, but not how, like, he didn't have anybody's quotes or interviews in there or anything like that. So, like, never had other points of view. But I do think without talking about the stigmas, he did play into them.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to, not to sound like beating a dead horse into the ground, but recognize your privilege. I'm looking at some of our other questions that we have. This is a good one. What's the power of reading a firsthand account like Haig's versus clinical or academic writing on mental health?
I prefer reading firsthand experiences, truthfully. But I think you have to be really careful when you're doing it because, again, it's important to be like, my journey is very different than your journey. This worked for me. It might not work for you. And he didn't do that. He said, this did not work. This did not work. This did not work. This did not work. And that was it.
And I think, too, that if somebody who was struggling with depression went into reading this book and then read kind of some of the things that he was saying, this didn't work or I didn't explore this at all, it almost was like, are you sending a message that you have depression and I don't need to try like meds because Matt Haig didn't and he got over it? Like, how much are you going to take that in as a reader? And I think that's where I struggle, because I think overall, like, I enjoy reading more clinical academic writing. I think also, to be fair, like, I'm in grad school, and so I think that's like
Where your mind is, right?
where my mind's at, is like wanting to have more like peer-reviewed research and things to stand on. But I think that If you are somebody that doesn't have enough knowledge about depression and about mental illness and you read this book, like you're ignorantly blind. Like you don't know how to look at it from another perspective. Like I went into it and I've experienced depression and I knew how to take what I needed and not take everything. But like somebody who maybe doesn't have that knowledge or is like looking for answers or like you're looking for, oh my gosh, like my experience like isn't understood. This may not be the best book for you. I would recommend other things.
Yeah, I agree. I think his is very specific. The way he got through his mental health journey is a very specific process for him. And I don't think it's one that a lot of people take. He did not want to try medication. He did not want to try therapy. And he wanted to do it all on his own. Like, as somebody who's gone through therapy and all of it, I don't necessarily recommend that way. And I feel like he's glorified that way a little bit, which I think could be dangerous because going at it by yourself, like a big part of depression is feeling alone. You need to know that there are resources and people and support out there for you. What I want to make such a big point is that it's okay to go to those. And I don't know if he didn't feel like it was okay or if maybe that stigma was ingrained in him where like men cannot go for that kind of help.
I wish I knew like more about what happened to him.
I wanted more about where it came from, what the triggers were. Like I really wanted more nitty-gritty from him. And to be fair, maybe he's just not ready in his journey to share that, and I have to be okay with that.
Where is like your panic disorder coming from? Where is this depression coming from? Like where is it stemming from? Who taught you how to panic? Who taught you that you're alone in the world? I want to know those things, and I'm not going to know those things unless he was willing to offer those.
And my thing is, he still give him credit for writing about his journey, but maybe if you weren't ready to share all of it.
If you're going to tell your story,
Sure.
you got to lay it out there. Remind me like what our issue was with the wife. What did he like say to her that made us feel like that he almost put responsibility in her hands?
I think because he just chose to do it all alone, like she was very kind about that.
He was very reliant on her support.
He was, and he wouldn't go out without her, which that part I can understand. There are times when mine's so bad I don't want to be without Andrew, but at the same time, Andrew is not my only source of support or the only coping mechanism I have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like he did that to his wife, which I think is not fair for her.
I wish I had the book because I remember like underlining or like writing something in there about a section, something that he like said to his wife.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're essentially like placing responsibility on your wife to be like your sole like supporter.
I agree.
Andrea just had to put up with way more than she should have.
I agree.
I don't think that he did it on purpose.
No, when you're in that space, like you're looking for anything you can and you're not really thinking about how it's affecting other people. I can say there are times where I definitely like lean on Andrew more than I might on a typical day. Andrew and I always say, people say a relationship is 50-50, but
It's
some
not.
days it's 60-40, some days it's 90-10, and that's fine. But it can't be 90-10.
Some days it's 99-1.
But it can't be all the time. Like, I'm sure she still had struggles.
Yeah.
And who did she get to go to?
Oh, I'm sure she had feelings about his depression and how he was handling it or worrying about him. And obviously the book wasn't about Andrea, but who are you reaching out to? Who's your support system? Because it didn't sound like in some of these states in their life, he was available to be a support to her.
And they lived with his parents. And she left her job overseas for them to move home with her parents. I feel like she sacrificed a lot. And I really love that he had that. That's amazing. But at the same time, it's almost like eating into it because he didn't want to go to therapy. He didn't want to do medication. In my experiences, it's hard for me to help somebody that's not willing to try all of the steps. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think too, like it is valuable. I wish I had her perspective a little bit because
I agree.
at the end of the day, like he maybe was putting that subconscious pressure on her to be the support, but also as a wife, like you do have responsibility to have your own boundaries. And what did she choose to take on versus what she didn't have to take on? Like, what help, like you said, what supports was she getting?
They always say you can't pour from an empty cup. So her cup had to be filled enough where she could help him. And I really would love her take on it.
Yeah, she should write a book on her reasons to stay alive. I think that overall, the positive thing about this book for me was that he obviously found solace in writing.
Yeah.
Like, we've talked a lot about, like, his lack of recognition of privilege and, like, all of the generalization in the book and, like, the, I think, pressure that maybe he put on his wife to be the sole supporter. But it seemed that to write this story, it was helpful. And I know from personal experience, like, how important, like, creativity is in helping with mental health. And so I think that he utilized the coping skill that he had. And the coping skill that he had was writing.
Because he has written other books. I don't think we've said that. Like, he has written other books. He is a well-known author, which I think also made us excited for this book was his previous writing. So I do love that he used his art form to express himself. Because I think art therapy, all of that is, like, such a valid form of expression. And maybe he just was trying to convey that without saying it.
I'm going to be honest and say that after I read Reasons to Stay Alive, I took off all the other books off my TBR.
Read The Midnight Library. And I think I will.
I did want to read it. I don't think I'm going to read it. I had it on my shelf. I bought it from a reused bookstore. I gave it away. I was like, nope, I'm done. I don't want to read this.
I'm going to try eventually. The thing with his writing, it just wasn't for me. I think I like, he did show that the journey is not linear. But
Yes.
in order to do that, it was a lot of back and forth and not really addressing the back and forth. And I liked that he showed it wasn't linear and that he had better days years ago. And now I love that. It was hard to follow. Like, I did have to flip back a little bit and be like, where are we?
It's also so interesting as I'm, like, looking at some of he has way more books than I thought, but, like, his bigger ones are Reasons to Stay Alive, The Life Impossible, which is a new one. That one just came out in 2024. Yeah, that one was new. And then Midnight Library came out in 2020, so around the pandemic. And it's interesting to look at the ratings too, because The Midnight Library is, I would say, probably the most well-known popular book, and it's 3.98 on Goodreads. And then his new one, The Life Impossible, is 3.48, but Reasons to Stay Alive has a 4.07 rating.
Wow, are we just mean? Are we just being really judgy?
I'm going to look at some reviews here. 38% of people give it a 5-star. 36% of people give it 4 stars, 18% 3, 4% 2, and 1% give it 1 star.
Before we continue, I have to call this out a little bit because it was upsetting for me.
I can't wait.
Does gaslight his readers because if I see a bad review, I spiral, I go back down, and I'm in my head like I wanted to give the book a 1, and I'm like, well, I can't do that. Like, I can't be the reason this man spirals again. So,
That's good of you because, again, let's bring it around town. If he spirals because of negative comments that I make, that's not on me. I feel like I have empathy, but, like,
yeah.
Sir, if you are spiraling because of negative reviews, then you haven't done enough work on your mental health.
That's fair. And like we've said before, if you're putting work out there, you do have to expect it's not going to be for everybody. I just feel so terrible. Like, I can't do it. And I think that's part of why I never DNF a book. Because, like, I don't want to do that to somebody's work. Like,
You're a kind soul. I'm going to hit some other negative reviews and see. So this very first one is a 5-star rating. The only book you need to read about depression. Finally, exclamation mark. A real book about depression that makes sense, that those with depression will read and sit nodding their heads and agreeing all the way through it. No psychobabble here from psychologists who have never experienced depression, just real raw telling of Matt Haig's journey with the dreaded black dog. This book should be given or bought by everyone battling depression or has a loved one battling it. I first read this and reviewed back in 2015, and I decided to read it again this year in 2023. I have watched how depression and anxiety in others post-COVID and those isolating lockdowns has ballooned. Never more timely to get yourself this book. So many are suffering with depression. It breaks my heart how many young people and teenagers are also. Please buy this book for yourself or anyone you know that needs to know they are not alone. Matt so simply explains how it feels. He is so darn honest, and all of what he says is true. Trust me, I know. He breaks it down into simple formats like lists of what you feel like on a bad day or what you were thinking, and it's all stuff that none of the other books cover. It's really genuinely what is going on in your dark mind. That was the one thing that I actually did is I liked some of his lists. I just needed to insert that. He tackles the issues of suicidal thoughts and tendencies and how scary it can be. Nobody wants to talk about that, right? But we need to. When those thoughts hit and you start thinking how you should do it, where will it work? What if I mess up and then I'm more damaged?
Yeah.
Often surprising to many people, these thoughts come calmly and logically, not just a split-second decision. Did you know the most written words on suicide notes are, "You'll be better off without me," because those fighting mental illness feel they are a burden on others. You feel ashamed and less than. Most don't truly want to end their lives, but desperately want to stop the awful pain and loss of hope. A bit that resonated with me was about how withdrawn you become from the world. Scared to go out on your own or even with others. You need people, but you can't cope with them. It's overwhelming. Matt mentioned staring out of a window and watching people go by and thinking he just wants to be normal like them. The intense battle to get over it, but it's just not like that. Brain chemistry is proven to be scrambled. If you have broken legs, nobody says, just get over it and walk. So why is there still far too much stigma around this? Valid.
Yeah.
It made me laugh in places too. It's gusty and so freaking let's get real about depression. It can hit anyone. You can be rich and famous and succumb to it. I think of so many that have gone, despite having loving friends or family around you, can feel so alone you are breaking apart. Just buy this book. It's the best I've ever read of hundreds on this topic. 5 paw prints from book lover cat lady for this little gem. Nice job, Matt. This one will help so many people. It should be given out at every counseling and therapy session for anyone with depression around the world. Thanks so much for taking a little time to read my review.
I liked her review more than I liked the book.
There were valid points that she did make that I do agree with.
And I think she did such a good job of maybe his words just didn't click for me. I agree that you don't want to be alone. And, everything she said I agree with, I did not get from him, though.
No.
I didn't.
And this is such an interesting conversation to have, but how different opinions are on how books hit for people.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. It's just crazy. And it all comes back to worldview and what you've experienced and how you view the world and things like that. But it's just even when it comes to fiction. But yeah, so I really liked her review. So here's a 1 star. Matt Haig recommends exercise and world travel as a cure for mental illness. He felt bad while living in Ibiza with his girlfriend, but he's better now. Cool. He says he's not anti-medication, but also says that SSRIs aren't better than a placebo. He doesn't want to take anything because then he wouldn't be able to fully experience life. His lists of reasons to stay alive are shallow, and he seems completely unaware that life is pretty difficult for people who aren't being financially supported by their families or emotionally supported by an understanding significant other. I don't want to criticize his feelings or experiences, nor those of the people posting 5-star reviews. If you get something out of this, that's great for you, but I found it somewhat infuriating. To each their own. Yeah.
I agree. I don't want to call his reasons to stay alive shallow. I'm not going to go there.
No, I don't agree with that.
I think any little reason is amazing because that's the goal of life is to stay alive. So hold on to whatever makes you feel like you can. So I don't want to go there, but everything else I agree with.
I'll give a 2-star. And this is also, I believe, by a female. Middle-class pep talk, which I found very annoying, takes no account of social inequality and the effects of poverty, poor education, lack of employment opportunities, inadequate mental health services, etc. Depression is an illness, but some people also have very difficult, depressing lives. Reading Graham Greene novels and taking up yoga is way down on their list of priorities.
I agree.
I do too.
What he said was you have to check the privilege you had or he has to, in the experiences he got to have to handle his depression. Whereas I can't just up and go to Paris if I'm feeling bad. Not that I would, but I'm just saying.
And this first line of this review that I just saw is, I think, perfectly describes what we're talking about. I have no problem with someone writing a personal memoir of depression. This review is not to critique the author's authenticity of experience. Rather, I'd like to warn those who may be in the depths of depression that this book may come across as simple, pandering, smug, trite. The solution is simply bootstraps, which may do more harm than good at increasing understanding and reducing stigma of mental illness. Perfectly said.
Perfect. I agree.
I'll read a 4-star. This one says, so good that it should be required reading in schools for GPs, everyone. Haig says that each mind breaks differently, but I think his heartfelt words will say and mean something to anyone who has felt anxiety or depression. Some sections were so real that I had to put the book aside for a while. It's brilliant and hopeful. My thanks to Matt Haig for sharing so much of himself. It's not something most of us are able to do.
Like I said, I give credit where credit is due.
And I think that statement right there at the end, it's not something most of us are able to do. You know what? You reached one person and maybe he inspired that person to share their story. I always say, if you reach one person, you did your job.
Yeah, literally.
So we'll end it with a 3-star because it's like an average down the road. She starts it with a quote and it says, "There is no standard normal. Normal is subjective. There are 7 billion versions of normal on this planet."
That's a quote from the book, I think.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Which, valid.
I say that to people all the time. They're like, I feel like I should be in a different place in life. I'm whatever age. And I'm like, who cares? I went to school with people who were starting their second, third, fourth careers.
Yeah. What's your definition of normal and who taught you what normal means?
Yeah.
So this person says, "While I have heard mostly good things about this book, I seem to have a bit of criticism. This was like a double-edged weapon for me. While it dealt with stress and anxiety and depression, and it was relatable while doing so, I couldn't help but think that I am heading towards a worse place, mentally speaking. The author describes how his life was normal, but there were some mild signs that I can reflect on myself. I am absolutely sure the author wants to help people, but for some reason it made me a bit uncomfortable. If my anxiety ever gets worse, I will know it is not the end because I have read this and will recall the good parts as mentioned earlier. I also expected a bit more fascinating writing, not that there was something wrong with the current style, but the hype made me expect more. All in all, I can say that this is a good book, but must be approached with the right mentality. I read it with a friend who also felt the same. I should have lowered my expectations, but I can still see myself recommending this to other readers."
Okay. I can't see myself.
Correct. But I agree with everything else.
Yeah. I do agree with that.
Honestly, that was really, reading through some of those reviews, really insightful.
I agree. Like I said, I wanted other points of view for this because I knew you and I had the same point.
Apparently. I think that a great way to end this would be to talk about our reasons to stay alive and add just some
light fluff.
Some lightness. We did give that quote. We had some other ones written down. I can hit those first and then we can talk about our reasons to stay alive. I'll hit one and you can hit one. We had 3 quotes. One was read in that review, which was a great quote for anyone who feels wrong for being different. And so the next one is, "You are not your mind. You are not your illness. You are not your fear. A gentle but powerful reminder that mental illness does not define you." And I think that is why I felt icky about him saying depressives, because I think that depressives makes it feel like that you are your illness.
I agree. And I'm also like, it's weird for him to say this, but then in my mind, I was like, but it's weird that he then goes on to call them depressives because they're conflicting statements to me. Like,
I
that was
agree.
the first thing I thought when I read that sentence.
100%.
Our next quote is, "Mental health problems don't define who you are. They are something you experience. You walk in the rain and you feel the rain, but you are not the rain." Again, I love that, but it goes against pretty much the whole rest of the book.
Yep. Yeah, there were, and that's the thing, is that's why I gave it a 2, because there were some like really beautiful quotes and I was like, these are awesome, but the content in your book is not supporting these statements.
I agree. Like, those 3 quotes right there, I absolutely love those.
Yeah.
But I just feel like his overall message was not that.
No. With that, just to end, what are your reasons to stay alive?
I have so many. My little cute pup here, my husband, my family, my friends. Life gets hard, but there are a lot of reasons. I can't even list them all. I have the cutest little nieces and nephews, the best husband I could ever ask for, the best friend I could ever ask for. So there's a lot.
Yeah, I would say mine are definitely my family for sure, like my husband and my son and my parents. I'm an only child and they're very important to me. And so they're for sure reasons to stay alive. I think that my passions and my creativity are a big reason for me to stay alive and keep going. I also think my spirituality plays into it too. I've had some losses in my life. I know that we touched on your loss, but I lost a daughter. And so I think that just like living on and honoring that I get to live on this earth and she didn't, like that's definitely a reason for me to stay alive as well. Being alive is hard, but it's also very beautiful. And those 2 feelings can coexist. And I have to remind myself that even on my hardest days where I wish that I didn't have to live this life, I am lucky to live this life, but I can hate it sometimes too.
Oh, for sure. We all can.
Yeah.
You don't have any mental health.
Oh my God. Even if you don't have any diagnosable mental health struggles,
Yeah.
like everybody experiences sadness and everybody experiences anxiety to a certain extent. You got to find your reasons to stay alive. So if you want to hit us up with your reasons to stay alive, we would love that.
Ah,
We should, you know what we should do? We should, when we post this episode, do a post on our social media platforms and have people comment like their reasons to stay alive.
I would love that because I think we need to share more positivity in this world.
And the stigma.
I love it. And the stigma, share your story. I love that.
I think that's like a beautiful spot to end.
Mhm.
And to be truly transparent, I don't think we know what we're doing next week in our next week episode.
No.
We talked about possibly doing banned books, but
Yeah.
we're just going to surprise you all. With that, until next chapter, stay cunning, stay brave, and remember you are your own high lady.